Well, I'm with Chief Minister and the Minister for Children and Housing. Today's category, it's about children mostly today. You heard today, an hour and a quarter, some of it praiseworthy, but what do you think of it?
I think overall, we've always been quite clear that there's, the expression might be, we're on a journey. We've taken the first few steps on it, and we've got a long way to go. So the progress report, as you say, was good in parts. I think the comments around children's homes was something about spectacular improvement, if I remember correctly. And but I've always been pretty clear that we've probably got about 18 months to go to get to adequate in terms of children's services. And that probably describes where we've started from as being inadequate, and then probably 3 years to get to what's known as good. So that gives an indication of the challenge ahead. We have taken steps. Sam, as the first Children's Minister, is one of those steps, obviously. You've got, obviously, the Children's Commissioner was in place previously, Care Commission, new law, all our children's rights officers, all those type of things, and the government plan as well does have over £20 million extra each year to go into children's as a whole. The bulk of it is into children's services. So that, as hope, is about demonstrating the commitment we've got about putting children first. That's it. That's
Unfortunately, the model, the UK model, which we tend to follow to a large extent, is very, very far from perfect. It's so flawed. And they were talking there about the Scottish model they look at quite a lot, but still part of UK at the moment, Scandinavian models, which seem to be better. But realistically, what can you follow? What can you say, okay, we'll take that? I mean, it's all very well adopting UK laws, but they're not very effective, are they?
Well, the Care Inquiry in its report has said that we need to adopt a Jersey practice model that suits our requirements. So you've mentioned Scandinavia. Myself and a few others have visited Scandinavia to try and learn from what they have there. I think they're generally regarded as very progressive countries. We do often look at the UK because it's our nearest neighbour, both certainly culturally and politically. So it's right that we look elsewhere as well and understand that as a small island with limited resources and a smaller population, how we deliver things is inevitably going to be different. But because of the commitments we've made on things like incorporating the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, that gives us the impetus to take action which just wouldn't have been fathomable a few years ago. So that the Care Inquiry has made that point. They're right, and work is ongoing there. But it is right that we shouldn't just look at the UK for everything, although there is some good practice out there.
It's not really looking at it, it's the sort of the way of thinking that goes with it, the sort of the cultural thing, UK being somewhat similar. For example, they're talking about Scandinavia, and there's a 16-year-old girl going around the world now, as was mentioned today, she's addressing the United Nations today. This is how progressive in their mind some people are. Now, I can't imagine, I mean, I know you're advertising at the moment for some children to go off to some far-flung parliamentary thing, but I don't think they'll be coming out with the same sort of status as that girl. Well, they won't be leading the world on it, like we keep saying. I mean, she is remarkable, isn't she? And I know she's not exactly the typical Scandinavian child, but she's quite extraordinary, isn't it? I can't imagine that being produced in the Jersey system. Anyway.
I mean, there's only one Greta Thunberg, and how that would come about for any other area. But I do have hope, certainly from a lot of the care experienced people that I've met in the last couple of years. I went on a visit to Scotland to meet some of their counterparts up there as well, and I'm seeing young people who, because of some of the changes we've made in giving them a children's commissioner who they can trust, giving them a children's rights officer who they know is looking out for their best interests, and listening to them and treating them seriously, that there are young people who are developing that self-confidence, that they might not have had those opportunities previously, and the more we can do to give those opportunities to those young people, I think more likely they are to develop into adults who are able to meet their potential, whether that is because they want to be the next activist for an important subject, or they want to go into business, or they've got an academic interest. they deserve those opportunities, and there is no reason why we can't be an island that gives those opportunities to people.
Extraordinarily, children in Jersey have the vote at 16. So of the age of the girl who's off in the United Nations at the moment, in theory, children of 16 could be participating in political things, but we all know, to a large extent, they're not. They're not getting, the old story, not getting involved. There's something, now this is one of the frustrations of the Children's Commissioner. If she gets it wrong, the question is, who's going to draw you to account? Oh, the children will. But they won't. There's no pedigree here for children to take that sort of action, is there?
Let Sam think about the response to that one. I'm going to go back to your point about Jersey youngsters as a whole. And I think actually, given the right opportunity, there's some out there. I mean, there's some out there who are already doing pretty good on the international stage. And you mentioned, I was frowning slightly. I couldn't remember if it's the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association that's the conference you're talking about. But I was actually doing a presentation up at one of the schools more recently, and I keep citing one of the French-speaking ones I've been to. And actually, the particular person in question who represented Jersey there did stunningly well. Both of them did, actually, that were there. So I think it depends on the context. I think it depends on the opportunities. And so I do think overall that on a variety of occasions, youngsters over here represent the island really, really well. So it's not quite as negative as you might portray. Do you want to answer the question that Mike's just asked though?
So in terms of how the Children's Commissioner is held to account, the Care Inquiry report has given us some thoughts on that and some recommendations, and we're going to have to go away and have a think about what's been said and digest it. But as part of our commitment to young people and listening to the voice of young people, which is part of our pledge, part of the children's plan as well, and an important part of the UNCRC, which we are incorporating into Jersey law in the near future, that requires us to build institutions that children are capable of engaging with and will feel that meet their needs and they can express themselves properly too. That's not going to be easy, and in my head I don't have all the answers to what those institutions will look like or how they are genuinely child friendly, because I'm sure you know, as an adult complaining to services, sometimes that's not entirely straightforward either. So it's going to be difficult, but I think we've made some early commitments in moving into that direction.
Well, I hope you have, but I brought a lady over. I did Liberation 50, like 50th anniversary of the Liberation, and I had a Human Rights Week. And one of the speakers I brought over was Jerison Lansdowne. She'd written this fat red book on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which Jersey was desperately unprepared to ratify at that stage. They have ratified. Now, one of the places I took her was a school, several schools, where they were talking about having children's councils on the schools for the children to be participating. Now, strange enough, I spoke to somebody last week from one of those schools, and I said, how's the Children's Council going? Oh, we haven't got one. Now, I was amazed that after all this time, I mean, there's so standard procedure, children to participate in the running of the school and so on. Now, if that's true, that's pretty pathetic, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting. I think again, the difficulty is on sample size of one, as it were, is that represented across the island? Because certainly I was just thinking again, I'm sure I've got 3 examples I can cite where I know there are school councils. So I think it does depend on the individual school.
Yeah. Most of the schools do have them. It's a very small number that don't. But we are working to put together these networks of the different school councils. We're putting together. We sometimes call it a youth parliament, but it's going to be a little bit difficult to that. It's not going to mirror what the States Assembly does as a forum for enabling children from all different backgrounds to have their voice heard and speak directly to politicians and government agencies when necessary. So I do think progress has been made on that. But again, it'll get time before...
The Convention on the Rights of the Child, I think I've said to you before, Chief, is about... Why hasn't every household in the island had a copy of it?
Some reason, I don't recall you raising that with me, but anyway, it's not an unreasonable question. I suspect, actually, that I'm not even too sure if the Children's Commissioner isn't addressing that through going to the schools.
The focus...
It's not enough, though, is it? Because as you say, to raise the children's awareness is one thing,
Yeah.
but the parents' awareness and the employers' awareness, everybody's awareness.
No, that's
And as we were told today, even states member, the corporate parent, most states members have not done their training. They're not interested.
Let's deal with the last one actually, because and we were discussing this, and Sam can comment on the pledge. But I think in looking forward, one action I'll take out of the comments in the report is that I will be suggesting to the council ministers that for all ministers and assistant ministers, we change the code of practice, which requires a minister or an assistant minister to have done the training to be able to be a minister or an assistant minister. We'll put in a reasonable time frame, by the way, for now. But I'll also be writing then to the Scrutiny Liaison Committee to suggest they might want to consider the same. And then that leaves really a balance to be swept up by PPC. So I think on that particular area, I think there's certainly a scope for a lot of improvement, but I think those actions can be done, and we'll demonstrate that and put that improvement in place fairly swiftly.
I mean, even the fact that
the Chief Executive is also going to do the same for...
well, this is part of the complexity of these people who've got a children's hat to wear. Chief Executive, the Children's Rights Officer, You see, this is another thing. As always, I mean, there was always complexity because different people, the silo mentality, it meant people were assuming a role, you thought they had a role, but then you found out they didn't have the role. But now there's so many people who are claiming a children's responsibility, plus all the so-called social workers that are people who have a professional capacity. They're assuming a role as well. And it's too complex, isn't it? It's too complex.
But the point is that everybody's a corporate parent. And this is what we've not understood up until this point. And even I didn't understand it until a few years ago, before meeting people for whom this was really important to, that we're meant to treat children who are in our care as if they were our own children. And that means not brushing them aside because they're raising things that are inconvenient. It means not belittling them or disregarding their experiences when they put them to us. And so having a children's minister, it's not just my job. Every politician has a role to play in this, and that's partly why we came up with the pledge as a way of demonstrating that. And there's still some way to go. Some people still haven't signed it, and we need to have those conversations and help them understand it. But in the next few months, as we do some of this work, we'll have to take that out beyond government as well. You know, businesses are corporate parents. They have to understand what rights children have when they come through their doors. You know, some have done some good work on that. Some probably don't. It's not even on their radar. So, you know, we can say it's complex.
I can't imagine the electorate putting it on the electorate's radar. This is the problem, you see, because I've been campaigning on disability issues for so long. I'm sick and tired of hearing myself. I went to a meeting the other night, a hearing disability meeting, and I was amazed that the in-depth failures, they're still there. And I know the Minister for Health had just withdrawn one of the key professionals who was involved for cost savings. They said they're going to reappoint somebody else. But it was more than that. Even people who teach signing, they just don't exist. The lack of, which is another one of the themes here, you're going to have to find trained persons for doing all sorts of jobs. But in the deaf community, the same things I've been hearing for 40 years, still failure. I mean, I don't know if you guys realise the immense task which is written into this idea that children will have rights, but children of all shapes and sizes, disabilities, different languages, the whole complexity of it. Do you realise what it is involved?
Firstly, we know it's a massive challenge. That's why I said we've only taken the first few steps. What I found interesting is that Fondre actually named in a positive way Mark Rogers, and also actually made some positive comments as in the wider context of the new Chief Executive and their whole structural changes going on throughout the organisation. And part of that is around changing the culture, part of that is things like bullying and harassment, and that's just, so in the whole organisational change that is going on, this is another facet to it. So I'm fully aware of how big a challenge it's all going to be. But I think the fact there is a determination to do it, and at pace, which is important, I'm really hoping, you'll only know in 18 months in terms of children's services, or in 3 years, have we achieved what we set out to do? I mean, I don't mind if we miss it by a month or two, or we're ahead by a month or two, but is that going to be time frame? It's not going to be precise to the day that we've done it. But the direction of travel is there, the commitment is there, we're putting the resources in place, and I think the people who are in charge of implementing those decisions are probably the right people to
On
do it.
things like disability, I mean, the Children's Commissioner's office is not, in fact, wholly accessible. I mean, I was very disappointed. It's very large to step out the front door. If you get in there and you have to somehow let them know that you're for a wheelchair user, you've got a mobility permit. It's not. And there are lots of offices which are like that. They're not accessible.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't. I mean, this building, fortunately here, you can walk in, or again, in level access. There's a lift to the upper floor. It's accessible. And they've got a commissioner or somebody there sitting by the door. If you need assistance, he's there to give you assistance. But so many public offices are not like that. And but that in itself would require a considerable resource to put them right, which is what's going to happen. They're all going to have to be put right. Is that on the agenda? Have you got an officer to do that?
Well, I think the question about public officers is on the agenda. Anything that's new that has to comply with the right standards, which would solve a lot of your problems. But obviously anything that's in an old building, particularly listed buildings, we know there's a challenge. Our first job is to try and get the new facilities, get them constructed, and that will address some of the issues you're raising.
But I've been to blogs, I've done blogs recently on buildings which have recently become public offices. They've to take them over. But because they don't do any alterations to them, they don't have to improve them. They don't have to bring them up to standard. The building inspector will say, well, you haven't altered the building, so therefore you've got a big step, and if you haven't got a bell, let them know, if you haven't got a video link, and if you haven't got a lift, all these things, it's down to the sort of management of that department. Well, that's not acceptable if they're public buildings. It doesn't matter. The private landlords always know we can't do it, it's a private landlord. That's not acceptable.
Okay, I won't disagree. I don't know the examples you're talking about.
Well, I can tell you, yeah.
And I think we're going slightly off track.
Well, no, because it's an aspect of disability is integral for so many other problems.
Yeah.
For children, why they're not getting a proper crack of the whip is because there's a disability issue. It may be theirs, maybe their parents, who knows what it might be. But a lot of this for the children. Mental health was touched on today, and a deputy had spent a day in a mental health unit here.
And mental health, they use, there is again funding put aside to sort out the facilities up at Orchard House, etc. And there is also quite an improved focus so far on mental health. That was one of our key pledges as well. So, you know...
But there's a huge catalogue of these pledges.
We know.
And if that report has been issued today, so I can only repeat myself, if that report was the first report, people would be saying, there's an awful lot wrong with Jersey, isn't there? If that report we heard today is the first report, but of course it's been going on for 6 years. These things have been turning over in the Jersey mine for 6 years, and there's still all those defects.
But don't forget, we've said, we've acknowledged, long journey, we've started it. The report today is saying in certain areas there's positive, and in other areas there's more work to do. We're committing to do that more work. We're pleased with the positives. We recognise where the challenges are.
It may not be the direct responsibility, I don't know whether it is. All the officers you've got now, the Rights Officer, the Children's Commissioner, Charlie Parker, is it not possible to call a substantial meeting for all of these officers to meet the public, so that all their responsibilities can be compared and say, you know, it doesn't work, what you're proposing, it doesn't work like that, this is the practicality. I can only say, after all the years I've been whinging about different aspects, I don't think politicians do know how it works, or don't know how it fails to work. I don't think they do.
Well, we've got public meetings tonight and for the rest of the week about the government plan. I'm sure that we're going to get a lot of these sorts of comments made to us, but my focus is obviously on children and how they are able to submit their views to us. I met there was something earlier this year where a young person got to be the Children's Commissioner for the day, and I met her, and she had some really good and interesting stuff to say about her school. She was at the Rockier School, which has got, I think, very good facilities for people with hearing impairments there. And we need to empower those people to be able to make these contributions and listen to them. But the fundamental point underpinning all of this is that this stuff is really hard. You've got to fund things properly, you've got to make sure services are integrated, you've got to make sure that you're not forgetting those silly little things that don't occur to you unless you are a service user. And all of that's really difficult to get right. But what this report that we've received today does is that it helps point us in the right direction on some of these issues, that is a positive thing.
Well, it's got some pretty awful issues for Jersey to deal with. It will never deal with the bailiff. It won't change the reviews process for parishes. They won't do it. Knocking down Greenfield, knocking down Hotel, all these have been discussed and they've all been rejected. Now the people of Jersey, I can't see them changing their mind on that. These have been, the popular voice has spoken.
Well, Hotel Ground is a difficult one, but obviously we went through a consultation process last year. It included people from the citizen panel, and actually overall I read directly the result of the feedback from the panel as well. And so we've listened to those perspectives, and that's the course of action we've taken. So we'd be in a slightly more difficult position if we hadn't listened to their views. If you see what I'm trying to say. In terms of greenfields, there is action being taken. There's some funding in place for a feasibility study for next year. I think there's money in the capital programme thereafter. And but we had a meeting at COM, a discussion at COM, I think you reckon it was 2 sittings ago, which was specifically around greenfields and its future purpose. So there is action being taken in some of those areas that we can deal with. And obviously the feedback from this will be built in, so we'll see where that goes. On some of the other matters as well, some it's a matter of the Assembly, some it will be a matter of the Youth Justice reviewing and taking account of, again, the feedback. Don't forget that if you use the parish inquiry system as an example, they did highlight some of the benefits from it as well. So it's a case of maybe don't throw it away, or hopefully not throw it away, because I think there's a lot of positives in that. But actually, is there something that needs refreshing? So, let's now it's time to digest it, and let's see where we end up.
There's loads in it, we can't discuss them all, but today they were discussing not allowing the Crown officers to be giving legal advice because it's not sufficiently independent. So now, those sort of things are so fundamental to the Jersey way that the Crown officers simply will not let go, will they? They want control.
I haven't seen the bit on the legal advice.
The care inquiry did say that progress was being made on that front. Yeah. And just to challenge you on part of this, that these issues are on the agenda like they have never been before. The things that we're now getting on with 2 or 3 years ago were just not happening. You remember Deputy Paul Leclerc brought a proposition to get a Children's Commissioner introduced, and that was rejected. And now here we are, not only with a fantastic Children's Commissioner in place, but with a really good piece of legislation underpinning it as well. So I do think it is right to say that it is a fact that we are in a much better situation to be dealing with these issues than we have previously.
You are in your mind, but I don't see the rest of the 49 states members being in a better position in their mind because they won't let go. And the population out there generally in the parishes, I don't think there's an awful lot of it. People in the town parish don't give a damn, but a lot of people in the country parishes won't let go of these things.
Well, what we can't do is there's issues you can, you may or may not be able to change public opinion on, but a lot of the stuff is around stuff that's entirely within our gift, and it's entirely around getting the right people into the right place to provide the right services to children. And that we have committed to, we're putting money behind that commitment, and we can do that. But as I said, it's a journey, 18 months and 3 years. That's what we've got to focus on getting going to.
My very last point is a guy who's been campaigning for years, giving legal advice, Alan Collins. Why are so few Jersey lawyers doing what he's doing? What's the problem?
I'd say that's a matter for them. You'd have to ask them. I can't.
Well, doesn't that rather reflect something about the same old thing, the Jersey way? They won't do things which are not politically attractive, are they? Well, they're not commercially attractive or whatever. Why can it be? And any community, I've discussed it with Alan several times, in a community of 100,000, 200,000, but it would be with a legal population, it would be inconceivable that all the lawyers would go and hide when there's a matter about child abuse and child neglect comes up. Not just once, year after year. You'd think there'd be a group of Jersey lawyers would say we've got to do something about this, wouldn't you?
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be awkward. I genuinely can't comment on that one because I don't know enough about it. But maybe it's a case to sit down with the Law Society and get a view from them.
Well, perhaps it's a job for you to sit down with the Law Society.
Yeah, more than happy to. I've just spent a week in Madeira who have been having their election campaign, and I've been speaking to candidates and campaigners and trying to get to grips with the vast different cultural approaches to doing politics they have there, and it is a fact that Jersey has a very unique political culture, to put it lightly, and that that's one of the reasons that we have uncontested elections. It's why we have a low voter turnout. It's why we have fewer campaign groups like you're describing.
But is it why we've got abused children? Is that why we've got abused children?
That's what the Jersey Way gets at. That's the insinuation there, that when you have a less democratic society or...
Because they don't have the same amount of abused children in Guernsey, do they? It's not, they have some in Narrowman, but not to the same extent. Similar sorts of islands, similar sort of financial activities, but for some reason, they don't have this problem.
We're a unique island in many wonderful ways, but also in many ways that's not so good. But the fact is, you're not going to change things for the better if your starting position is one of negativity. That's why we've got to be optimistic and ambitious to
And
get
we've
this
also
through.
made the point, and it's made in here as well, yes, the Jersey Way has negative connotations. Interesting enough, in here they have tried to make the point as well. There are some positive connotations, and that's what we should be trying to build on. That's about community and working forward.
It's not my plan to render you speechless, but so I will end there.
You're really close,
Your keeper has just come in to tell me to shut up, so I will shut up. Thanks very much.
Okay.